Good morning, everyone. My name is Jeremy Kitchen. I'm the Executive Director here at Texans for Fiscal Responsibility. We are joined by our fearless leader, President and CEO of TFR, Tim Hardin. Good morning, Tim.
Good morning.
We are also joined once again by special guest Vance Ginn, Ph.D. economist, president of Ginn Economic Consulting. Good morning, Vance. Okay, so we'll go ahead and get started. Obviously, we are well into the legislative session by this point. I think today is day 98 of the 140-day legislative session. And so we're rearing and gearing, if you will. We've got priorities kind of moving through the legislative process. I think it's important maybe to start off today's talk with kind of discussing on where the budget is at, right? So the proposed state budget for the next biennium, that means fiscal years 2024 and 2025, has already, of course, passed the House. It passed the House not last week, but the week before. And it has already quickly made its way through the Senate legislative process and has already been put on the Senate intent calendar, where it's widely expected that it will be it'll be considered or taken up this week. And so let's start off with kind of what our expectations are there. We'll start with you, Tim, just kind of broadly speaking where everything's at. And then as Vance reconnects, we'll go to him.
Sure. Yeah, I'll let Vance get into the kind of nitty gritty of what's going on in the Senate. I think from our perspective, the big, elephant in the room is property tax relief, right? And we had Governor Patrick come out last week and basically say he's not going to pass HB2 because appraisal caps don't work. I know they've adjusted numbers over in the Senate in that budget. I'll let Vance talk about that. And so I think, in a year with a $3 billion surplus, it looks as though we've set up this, this fight that's going to involve how much is allocated in the budget of how much property tax relief is going to be given to Texas taxpayers. And the fact that now both chambers are kind of pitted against each other, and we're going to see exactly what the Senate does when they deal with the budget and how much is allocated in that rider. I think there's a very real possibility that Texans get nothing this go round, and we might have to go to a special session or something like that. And so as far as the budget is concerned, I think that's how much of that surplus is going to be given back to taxpayers, and we're going to see that in the budget.
Vance, I'm not sure if you got the issues worked out or not, but if you have, maybe respond to Tim there from what you heard, and then maybe kind of a 30,000-foot view on where the Senate version of the budget that's already passed the House is.
Yeah, Jeremy, I'm here. So I think Tim is right. I think that the Texas Senate is spending too much, and whenever we've done a breakdown of the overall budget, which measuring apples to apples here, not spending what they spent in 2020, 22, 23 compared to what's appropriated in 24, 25. That's what the Legislative Budget Board does, which is more of an apples to oranges or something else sort of comparison. That's not really a consistent comparison. When you measure appropriations to appropriations, you have a 16.3% increase in the total budget, which is a $43.2 billion increase in the amount of appropriations. So it's just a massive amount of increase in the size of the budget. And if you exclude federal funds and just look at state funds, the increase is 25.4%. So that's 42 billion of the 43 billion. So it's not much of a federal fund. They can't blame it on federal funding in this case. It's really on the state. General revenue is up 18%, and so forth. And so this is a massive increase in the budget. Now, some of that is that property tax relief that Tim mentioned and that you were talking about of 15.1 billion. They actually went down in the total amount that they're providing for old tax relief of 5.3 billion. That stayed the same, but the new relief went down from $11.2 billion to 9.8. So you take 9.8, you add 5.3, that's where they're putting out this number of $15.1 billion. But, and so it's even less tax relief than what they said before, which means about a third, even less than a third of the surplus of $33 billion is going towards property tax relief. And you remember, the Senate has a combination of things between SB 3, SB 4, SB 5, which is the homestead increase into $100,000 for those that are disabled and over 65. They have a small amount of compression of about 6.75%. And then there's some business personal property tax relief that's in there as well. And so what I think they're doing in the Senate, they're spending a lot more than the House. The appropriations is higher than what it was in the House. And a part of this in the Senate is this $10 billion for subsidizing natural gas plants, but a number of other things that seem like bad policy to me. And so I'm hopeful is that Tim said is that, we have more money that goes towards property tax relief. We need up to $20 billion, at least $20 billion for there to be a record. And that should be of new property tax relief. If you go all the way back to 0809, $14.2 billion, adjust that for inflation, that's $20.3 billion. And so that's really what we need right now. And even if you adjust this for population growth plus inflation and say you exclude the amount of property tax relief at 22, 23, at 24, 25, it's up 19.4%. So it's well above population growth and inflation of 16%. So I don't even think that this is a conservative budget either. It's just all around, it's just too much spending, too much appropriations, and very little in property tax relief.
Vance, what I hear you saying, and of course we talked about these kind of narratives, over the last few weeks, really, is that, when we covered the House version of the budget, as we had a live stream, right? We talked kind of incessantly about the fact that the budget represents government growing, right? It's growing way beyond its means, as you just said, right? Way beyond what we would consider maybe conservative. And then you have the Senate version of this budget that's already passed the House, and it seems like they're growing it even more, albeit by a little, right? But even more than what the House did. And then we have less money that they're trying to isolate for property tax relief. Now, obviously, you indicated, right, that some of that would go towards kind of the efforts, if you will, by investing in these natural gas power plants. I think last I heard today, actually, I was listening to kind of a summary of what that plan is, and it seems like that's going to be a kind of two-tiered thing where there's kind of a first tranche of money to get it up and started, and then there's a second tranche of money that's expected sometime in the next few years that they'll have to allocate it, which would be even more than the $10 billion you talked about to try to get kind of everything else online. I say all that not because we don't think, that, rectifying the power grid in the state might not be important. But, I think the big takeaway is when we talk to taxpayers, right, as we travel around the state, certainly they're talking about the issues when it comes to the grid and everything else. But man, by and large, people are feeling the property tax issue and the ever-growing burden. And so it is certainly worrisome, to y'all's point, that we might not get, right, as an outcome of this legislative session, enough property tax relief to be effective, right, to be tangible and real. Before we move on, do y'all have any additional thoughts on that?
Well, I would just kind of piggyback on that, Jeremy, and just say, you're right that there needs to be more in property tax relief, less appropriations. And when you look at the total budget, the House was up 14.3% in appropriations to appropriations. The Senate's up 16.3%. That additional couple percent are billions of more dollars that's in the $5 billion more dollars in the Senate's budget compared to the House budget. That could be going towards what? Property tax relief. And I hear some out there saying that we need to expand Medicaid, which is a terrible idea. Coverage doesn't equal quality, access to quality care. And the way to actually get people to have more income and more jobs and well-paid jobs is a more vibrant economy. And how can we do that? Property tax relief. I think that would be a great way to boost economic growth in the state, get people off these safety net programs, which also benefits taxpayers as there's less government spending needed. And we could be in a more vibrant situation to where we shouldn't be trying to backstop or subsidize any energy markets. We should have a level playing field to where the marketplace works and prices can allocate resources best. Just because the federal government and some of the state is backstopping or subsidizing wind and solar, that doesn't mean you need to go in and then subsidize natural gas plants. This just makes no sense to me. It's more industrial policy that should end.
Sure. Well, Tim, I'm not sure if we lost Vance there or not. He certainly broke up. Tim, did you have any additional thoughts?
Oh, I would say if they're having such a problem passing property tax reform and we can't agree between the chambers, why don't we agree with the voters and put ourselves on a path to elimination? There's still a number of bills in the House, I believe one in the Senate, that would use surplus dollars to completely eliminate school M&O. And so if we're going to have this infighting, why don't we do what the people of Texas have demanded and put ourselves on a path to elimination and start pushing one of these other bills instead of trying to ram this square peg through the round hole? Just my opinion.
Sure. Okay, well, Tom, I see your request to speak. Give us 1 second, and we'll certainly oblige your question request. I want to move on just for our additional topic today, which is House Bill 2127. For those that are not familiar, this is, of course, a bill that we're watching at Texans for Fiscal Responsibility. It specifically deals with the preemption of local government, right? Kind of these burdensome regulations, this patchwork, if you will, of regulations that take place all across the state. They stifle business and ultimately prosperity. That is up on Tuesday's House calendar. So wanted to kind of pitch that to both of y'all gentlemen, whoever wants to go first, as to kind of your thoughts on its prospects going forward, whether or not it passes the House, that sort of thing.
So I'll jump in. So I think it has a very good chance of passing the House. I mean, honestly, statistically, anything that comes at House floor is going to pass. I mean, it's very rare for anything not to pass. But this is a good bill. This bill deals with a number of different codes, and for those who don't know what preemption is, it's essentially the state telling local municipalities and governments that, hey, listen, we can't have this patchwork of regulations that are anti-business. And what this does is it references like agriculture, business, finance code, insurance code. There's local government code, natural resources, and so there's a wide net this is casting. And I think it's one of the lessons we learned from the COVID pandemic is that local governments can absolutely be tyrannical if left unchecked by the state. And this operates under the principle that only the state is sovereign and that the state created the cities. The state's also created the federal government. And so the city, does not have this quote unquote local control right to stifle business. It's the job of the state to step in and protect the market, protect businesses. So I think this is going to be an easy pass. And I think that we should see it even pass in the Senate. It's a good bill. We support it, and I hope it does.
Anything to add on that, Vance? I will. I'm not sure if Vance is having technical issues or not, but okay, we will move on. I guess to questions. I know Tom, you requested to speak. The only thing I would ask for folks. Oh, the only thing I would ask for folks is that you keep it somewhat short and brief for a question. We try to keep these episodes fairly short and sweet. So I will approve you 1 second, Tom. Give me 1 second. All right, there you go, Tom. Good morning to you.
Good morning. Yeah, I had a question about Senate Bill 1751 that's going to regulate crypto mining here in Texas further. But then I just had a quick comment. The one bill that I saw from the PUC ERCOT regulation that's about to take place as far as natural gas subsidies was a 1% loan from the state of Texas to companies to buy generators that they have to pay back. So I don't know if I really consider that a subsidy. It is nice legislation that's friendly to the oil and gas industry, but it's also friendly to ERCOT. But as far as Senate Bill 1751 goes, it's designed to kind of curtail crypto mining in Texas. And of course, we have different special interest groups like Texas Blockchain Council that are fighting this. But it looked like it exited the Senate with a lot of support. I think maybe one no vote, and it's headed to the House. And it basically makes crypto miners start paying taxes. They don't get tax exemptions that other businesses get. And so it's not really business friendly. It's kind of unfair, I think, perhaps, that they're being treated differently. But I didn't know if y'all had an opinion on this bill. And if you did, I would love to hear it.
So I guess I would say this. Give me 1 second. Sorry, there's some technical difficulties on this end. I would say this. So looking up Senate Bill 751, we might have our numbers backed up because it looks like Senate Bill 1751 is authored by State Senator Lois Kolkhorst and deals with ERCOT. And so I'd say there might be an issue there. We might be one or two off, but nevertheless, I would venture to guess, and I'll pitch this to Tim here in a second. I don't believe we're under any illusion that we should be regulating cryptocurrency by any means. I don't think the folks on this call are absolutely concerned about the federal version of cryptocurrency. What I think it's July, if you will, that goes live. And so, from a very 30,000 foot view, before I pitch it to these folks, I think we would be opposed to such a thing just on its surface. I'll admit to you that I have not read that bill as of yet. On the ERCOT issue, I think we kind of mentioned it before, but we certainly think market forces should be involved in what has not historically been a market force-led kind of power system here in Texas, and we are concerned that by throwing money at it, I'm not familiar with the 1% as you speak to be candid with you, but to throw money at it, is it putting a Band-Aid over an overall issue, which is maybe not efficiently using resources? So I say all that, that doesn't directly answer your question necessarily, but I think that's kind of where we're at. Tim, I'll pitch it to you if you have any additional thoughts.
Yeah, so it does have to do with the 𝗧𝗏𝗪𝗏, but he's right. This is at least the start of regulating crypto blockchain, and it has to do with the electricity loads, right? I think it limits it to
I see that now. You're right.
Yeah, like 10 megawatts, and so this obviously I would think is a direct kind of reaction to the ERCOT fiasco a few years ago, and they're trying to protect our grid. And so the low-hanging fruit and who they target are likely Bitcoin miners, right? Because Bitcoin miners are the ones that have all of those, ant miners that just pull tons and tons of electricity. Some other crypto has gone, proof of stake and doesn't, use as much. And so this could be, the start of Texas kind of forcing a proof of stake concept that is not using as much electricity. But either way, I'm a fan of crypto. I'm a fan of Bitcoin specifically. I think it's the king of crypto for a reason. And so anything that's coming in to regulate this decentralized currency, and I'm glad you brought this to our attention, Tom, because it is concerning. I don't know if it's like an overarching, like, hey, we're hardcore coming, but this is certainly the foot in the door. And I don't think good things are going to come after. This is how government works, right? They do a study, and then they do a couple small things, and then next go around, they're going to come even harder and come even harder. And so you have to stop these things in their track. And we have to keep the free exchange of currency, digital currency, in the hands of the people, and keep government's grubby hands off of them for sure.
Vance, not sure if you can hear us, man. I know we're having some technical issues. Do you have any thoughts?
Yeah, can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Oh, okay, good.
Yes, sorry.
Yeah, no, sorry. Sorry, I missed Tom's points earlier because I got kicked off somehow. But I mean, just as following along with Tim and what you were saying, Jeremy. Yes, I mean the digital currency needs to be left to the markets, which means the people. There shouldn't be any regulating or things of that nature. There are some interesting things that are happening where maybe the gold bullion depository could accept gold or digital currency, and so maybe that could also be then used to pay for property taxes like digital currency. I think that has some interesting parts to it. Only I'd be concerned about then is that would the state then want to step in and do more regulation, because then they're going to be more connected with it. But I think that's something to look at. I'm definitely against the central bank digital currency that the Federal Reserve and other countries are trying to do across the globe. I think that's a horrible idea. The Federal Reserve has already depreciated 7% since it was put in 1913. Why would we want the government to be involved with digital currencies? They shouldn't be. So I'm hopeful that will not happen in Texas, of getting their grubby hands in more trying to regulate what's going on with digital currencies.
All righty. Well, before we end today's episode, wanted to remind folks, of course, that, we, as we said, right, I think it's day 98 out of 140. I'll tell you, Tim and I spoke about this on our weekly Taxpayer Talks podcast last week, that, yes, that means that, there's 42 days left in the legislative session. But the reality is, especially in the House side, these kind of self-imposed deadlines are coming quicker than most people expect. That first one being Monday, May 8th, which is exactly 3 weeks from now. And so I want to let folks know that, 3 weeks from now, what that deadline represents is it's the last day that House committees can vote out House bills or House joint resolutions to get to the floor in time. And so, if you're an activist or someone listening to this that's interested or following specific legislation, and that legislation has not got a hearing yet, that it needs to get a hearing in the next 3 weeks for it to kind of still be viable, if you will, and make it through the legislative process, at least in the House side. So I wanted to make sure that was on folks' radar. Of course, the House and Senate convene at 11 a.m. today. I imagine you can expect that here in over the next few weeks, we'll really start to see them convening 5 days out of the week as opposed to the 4, and for longer and longer as those calendars get longer. And so that's a good reminder to folks to The best way to stay kind of up to date with legislation moving through the process that could impact your wallet. We put out vote notices for every calendar day. We did, of course, one for today as well. You can stay tuned to that if you're not already by subscribing on our website, texastaxpayers.com/subscribe. You can specifically subscribe just for the vote notices if you like. And of course, we use those vote notices at the end of the legislative session to compile our fiscal responsibility index. So unless y'all gentlemen have anything else, we'll go ahead and wrap up this week's episode. Make sure to join us again next week at 9 a.m. for another episode of The Week Ahead. Thanks so much. Hey, you made it to the end of this video. Thanks for watching. We really appreciate it. Make sure you subscribe and hit the bell icon so that way you're notified next time we post a video and update to the channel. Thanks again.